webinar. Hopefully you found part one really informative, as I did. I'm editor and publisher of DemandGen Report. We work with a lot of marketers on engagement strategies. We're hearing a lot of folks that are struggling with the conventional webinar, getting folks to register in the first place and then attend and actually drive that engagement. So we're really finding this concept of flipping the webinar very interesting. I enjoyed Michael's presentation on that and the concept. So we're fortunate today we're going to bring Michael back, and we're going to be able to ask Michael some questions directly. For those of you that aren't already subscribing to DemandGen Report, we encourage you and invite you to go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter. You can learn more about topics like this and other digital engagement strategies. You can do that at demandgenreport.com. So, Michael, let me ask you to come back in and join us, and welcome back, and thanks for making time today.
Great, thanks very much, Andrew, and it's really a pleasure being here. What I'm going to do is spend the first maybe 2-3 minutes really quickly going through and recapping kind of what we talked about, in case there are people who didn't see part one or might need a quick refresher. So let me flip through these slides quickly. This really all started with a conversation with people who are producing a lot of webinars about the state of the webinar. They were saying it's a format that isn't as powerful as it used to be. Sign-up rates are going down, attendance is declining. So we put a little bit of thought into how do you revive or reinvent the webinar. The webinar really is stuck in a rut. It's a very, very uniform format. It tends to be 60 minutes. It's scheduled for 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Eastern Time, like this session is. It's audio narrated slides. There's no video. Typically, it's typed in Q&As. And what we found, and this is detailed quite a bit in part one, which is that webinars have a personality problem, a scheduling problem, a length problem, and an engagement problem. So we actually looked at a model that we got familiar with by working with educators a lot, called the flipped classroom model. It's something that is getting really popular in classrooms, particularly universities. And in the traditional classroom, what you do is you have the teacher or a professor standing up and giving a lecture for the first, sometimes the entire class, and there isn't really much of a chance for interaction. In the flipped webinar concept, or in flipped classroom concept, what they do is that they tape the lecture in advance and distribute it to students, have them watch it in advance, and then they use that valuable time that they have together for an interactive session, much more interactive sessions, Q&A and workshops and interviews and that kind of stuff. And so really what we worked on is how do you apply that successful model to a webinar. And the result is something we're experimenting with. You're part of the experiment. And it's one that basically says, okay, let's distribute that core piece of the webinar material in advance. It's not going to change. It's not going to be affected at all by the fact that it's live. And let's distribute it in a much richer kind of multimedia presentation format with video and footnotes and things like that. And then let's go and handle use the live time as kind of a talk show or an interview section. And so, Andrew is hosting me. He's representing the viewers. We're getting questions in continuously. We got some questions in as people were watching part one, and so really that's the idea here. So, the presentation material can be a lot more compact. The learner can access the material sooner. There's faster delivery of marketing needs. There's more time for the interactive or Q&A sessions, and richer media are available for the initial presentation. And so, the whole idea is that for the audience, it's more flexible, engaging, and timely, and for the presenters and producers, it's less complex and stressful than trying trying to run a live webcast, and it really also gives an opportunity for a richer presentation medium. So, you know, that's the essence of what we talked about in part one, and now it's time to really go to the interactive session. And Andrew, why don't you fire away? I know questions have been piling up.
Yeah, we've got some great questions already coming in, and I want to remind everybody you can look right below your the video screen there. You should see a Q&A tab, so go ahead and type in questions that you may have. Michael, let me ask you quickly, though. You said this is kind of an experiment of the new format. You've done it in other industries, though. Can you share what the results have looked like compared to what you've seen for conventional webinars?
Yeah, that's really interesting. In fact, a number of people have asked for that. I've got a couple of slides on that. Yeah, here's one. If we can go over the slides. We did our first experiment with this on November 18th. It was to a corporate learning audience. So we did it in conjunction with Training Magazine Network. And we were blown away by the results, actually. So the live session date was on November 18th. 1,800 people registered for the webinar. Now, this is a hot topic, apparently, because usually, you know, like 1,000 people or 800 people would sign up for one of our webinars that we do with Training Mag. But 1,800 people signed up. Now, before the live session, 1,066 people came in and viewed it. So that was 58%. So you're already ahead of the game. You know, going into the webinar, where, you know, normally it might be anywhere from 35 to, you know, 42% of the people who sign up for the webinar actually come in and view it. And then we've had another 411 viewing sessions since November 18th. So cumulatively, we've had 80% as many viewing sessions as we had registrants. There may be some double counting, people coming in and viewing twice, or sharing it with colleagues or the like, but that's a pretty good yield.
Yeah.
And then
engagement rates are way higher than we're seeing on regular webinars.
Yeah, yeah. So now, you know, the attendance for the live session that we had on November 18th was approximately 700, so about 38%. So that's pretty normal. That's right in the range of what you'd normally see with a webinar. And then the views of the recorded live session since November 18th, we've seen 928. So cumulatively, there's a, you know, there have been 88% as many viewing sessions as there were registrants. And again, there's probably some pass along and sharing. We certainly encourage that. Yeah. But we really, really kind of liked what we saw there.
Good. All right. Well, let's switch to some of the questions we're getting from the audience. We've got a few come in around cost. Lynn and Denise, a couple of different questions regarding cost for this model of flipping the webinar. Lynn said, I love the concept, but would like to know if producing a flipped webinar is affordable. How much is the cost or subscription for this kind of platform?
Well, you know, the interesting thing is that the flipped webinar really is more of a concept than a platform. So you can actually divorce it to some extent from the tools. You know, depending on what the stakes of the webinar are, and what the size of your audience are, you can actually scale the cost from literally free to you know, to several $1,000s. And so for example, if you've got a high stakes webinar program and want to take advantage of, you know, some of the things that probably most of you saw in part one of, you know, having chapters and, you know, a follow along searchable transcript and you know, footnotes and calls to action and the like, animated slides. Then you can use a tool like KnowledgeVision's KV Studio for that, which will cost you between $8,000 and about $15,000 per year. And then you can do as many webinars as you want against that, you know, that's real useful. But if you're kind of a small shop, or just experimenting with the format and operating in economy mode, you can actually use a free app like Novio on the iPad. I don't know if you've seen Novio, but real simple iPad app that allows you to upload your slides and into the cloud via your iPad, turns on the webcam, and allows you to actually go through and record video and or audio commentary along with each slide, and then publish that out. Now, Novio is a free app up to 7 minutes, and you pay $10 and you can do longer presentations. But it's an easy way to do that first half of the webinar. So that's literally free or near free on a kind of a smaller scale. On the back end, what we're using right now is Google Plus Hangouts, and that's part of the whole kind of Google Plus YouTube family, and that's free. So so the answer is you don't have to spend a whole lot to do this. If you want to have all the bells and whistles and metrics and all that stuff, then and you're associating it with a larger scale marketing application, then you can buy something like KV Studio from KnowledgeVision, and that'll give you all those capabilities. But the basic concept is pre-record using whatever tool you use to pre-record, whether it's free or paid, and then have some kind of interactive session on the back end. And again, you can use freeconferencecall.com. You can use a moderated conference call, which costs something. You can use Google Plus Hangouts, which we're using here. Or if you want a highly interactive session, you can use something like Adobe Connect or GoToWebinar or things like that, more conventional tool.
Right. So you talked about some of the different platform options, Michael. Melinda actually had asked what technology do you use to create part one of this that you watched. So using that as an example, explain kind of what went into that portion.
Yeah, so we did use, as I mentioned, KV Studio from KnowledgeVision to create the first portion, and really, the production process was, first of all, obviously, you have the slides, and you do that in any case, and then what we did was we recorded me, in this case, giving the presentation, and we did it to camera. So I'm comfortable, kind of interacting with the camera, and that's fine. But if you have somebody who is kind of less accustomed to a camera, you can kind of put a small group together and have the person present to that group. So, second step is kind of videotape the presentation. Then you upload the slides and the video to KV Studio, to KnowledgeVision's KV Studio, and then you literally watch the video and change the slides at the appropriate time, and all that gets recorded. And then you can go back and add chapter marks. You can add footnotes, and we also use a company called 3Play Media to do the time-stamped transcription that kind of follows along with the presentation, and that's really useful for non-English speaking viewers and for the hearing impaired and the like. It actually helps fulfill some government requirements in that respect. And then when it's all done, you basically push publish, and 10 seconds later you end up with a snippet of code which you can then drop onto a web page, in this case a page on our website, and then you're off and running. It takes about probably the whole process of assembling everything once the video was shot and the presentation was made took about an hour.
Okay, great. Jeff in the audience had asked, is it possible to switch between slides and presentation? So in what you're seeing as a viewer, you get access to the slides and multiple visual experiences, but he's asking, can you vary the size side by side? Is it possible to have a video play in the slide area? Can you alternate that experience?
Sure. So you know, part one of this thing, which was a KnowledgeVision presentation, actually had side-by-side video and slides. And probably what you noticed as you were going along was sometimes the slides were bigger if there was a lot on the slides. Sometimes when you just wanted to pay attention to the presenter, then the video was bigger. You can actually make the presenter totally go away at any given point. You can make the slides go away at any given point. And you know, it's really easy to have any variant of that combination.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions. It seems like this is the first time people have used Google Hangout, and it's actually the first time I've used it. Very, very cool, and it's interesting to use it in this environment. Paul in the audience had asked, you know, Google Hangouts is very interesting, but is free YouTube availability really appropriate for paid webinars?
Yeah. So what you're actually seeing is, and I don't know how many of our viewers have used Google Plus Hangouts. It's actually, you know, kind of a great free conferencing tool anyway for, you know, video conferencing. But what they did was they introduced probably a year or two ago a notion of Google Plus Hangouts on air. And so what you have is you have a session of that can include up to 10 people. So in this case, it's me, it's you, Andrew, and it's the computer with the slides on it there. And actually, Samantha, who is in our marketing department, is on a fourth computer actually doing the switching and selecting kind of which of us is being viewed at any given time. You know, if Sammy didn't exist, then, you know, we might be doing it ourselves, or more likely we'd be lost. But in any case, then it goes out literally onto YouTube, and that's how the video is actually being transmitted. Now, you know, the question that he asked had to do with the privacy concerns about YouTube. You know, is it going out, you know, just to the public in an uncontrolled manner? And this is often a little bit confusing with YouTube. YouTube is not is by default public, but you can impose a whole variety of different privacy settings on it. So you can make it only viewable to yourself. You can make it only viewable to invited people. You can make it only viewable to people who have a certain URL. You know, and so you know, in this case, the video itself isn't visible to the Google search engine, or it can't be found by anybody who isn't, like, you know, part of this experience. So, you know, YouTube gives you a fair amount of control over that. Now, you know, if we had a webinar that had, you know, highly sensitive information that, you know, was about a secret sauce, or you know, contains regulated information, you know, such as HIPAA, you know, health-related information, we wouldn't use Google Plus Hangouts. You know, there are too many security holes in it that are vulnerable. But something like a public marketing webinar, we feel, you know, very, very comfortable using it. And again, part two, you know, this interactive session, there are any number of different ways to have that session, you know, that have various levels of security and privacy associated with them. Okay,
great points. You touched on earlier Adobe Connect as one of the platforms that the companies, you know, can and are using. It looks like Linda in the audience is using that. Any thoughts? Have you experimented with that? She's basically asking about using that for the interactive segment of a flip webinar. Do you think that works well? Anything you'd recommend to her?
Yeah, for for the interactive session, that works great. My wife uses it as part of her professional development activities. She she's a instructor and course designer in the corporate learning space, and teaches interactive courses. So if you have it, if you paid for it, that's great. It's a perfectly appropriate platform for having that interactive session. And one of the nice things about that, that tool is that you have a lot of kind of interactive elements. Google's a little bit Google Plus, the medium that we're using right now, is a little bit limited in that way. It doesn't have built-in voting and quick surveys and interactive elements that allow people to kind of draw on each other's screens and do interactive sketch boards and all that stuff. It doesn't have breakout groups, etc., like Adobe Connect does. But again, the important thing here is to think separately about the concept and the tools.
Yeah.
And there are any number of tools that can be used for either side of this. We happen to like using KnowledgeVision on the front end just because of the amount of kind of multimedia capability in it. But on the back end especially, there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat.
You mentioned your wife is an instructor, Michael. We had a question from Rob in the audience. He actually teaches a course online, and he's asking about using this format for that. He specifically the idea of using a highlighter to draw a fluid path or a sort of printed schematic. Can you do that more in the sort of phase one of this, like the part one of this webinar? Are there tools where you'd be able to do that kind of highlighting and make it more annotated?
Yeah, well, actually, I was playing around with this. Google has a lot of different tools kind of built into Google Plus Hangouts, and let's see if I dare do this. So I'm actually going to grab a pen tool, and I'm going to draw a circle, for example, around the background there. So you can do kind of crude annotation. And the like, but again, there are more interactive platforms. It's just that they aren't free. And one of the things that I really wanted to do with this webinar is to show you how to do it with a tool that is free and available to everyone.
Okay, good. All right. So one of the obvious benefits, I think, of the flipped webinar model is the scheduling flexibility that it brings. As you said, the flipped classroom model of learn in advance and then come ready to interact. So Kelly in the audience was asking about that scheduling issue. She said, is there any downside or problem with that, because people can access whenever they want in the true recording format, but there is still a live component? Or, are there any advantages to that? How do you handle geography? Any thoughts to that?
Well, one of the things we've thought about, from time to time is essentially having kind of geographic breakout groups, and for the second half, especially for a large global audience, we'll often have people from Europe or the Middle East. And we'll have people from Australia or Asia on our webinars, and so one of the things we want to explore, especially because the cost of handling the back end the way we're doing it now is zero, then other than our time, of course, is saying, okay, let's do 3 breakout sessions at different times of the day, different different dates, maybe even around different subtopics. So that can certainly be handled.
Okay. We have another related question from Paul. He's really excited about this format and concept. He's thinking about using it for some of the e-teaching, e-learning concepts that he's working on. His concern, though, was that people might share access, and I guess you're offering paid online classes. Any security issues you might be able to recommend that if you are doing this in a paid online learning environment, how you might monitor and address that?
Right. So I think it's important to separate again the presentation itself from how you handle paywalls and the like. So these presentations, both the live feed and the original presentation, can be locked to and hosted on web pages that can themselves have firewalls and paywalls associated with them. So generally, what we recommend is that people find a paywall or a firewall or registration, for the of course for your marketing audience or your demand generation audience. It's not so much paywalls as it is registration walls or registration gates, because you want to collect those leads.
Correct.
So the idea is to make the media pages available only to people who've gone through those gates, whether they're free registration, give us your name and your email gates, or paywalls that make it available for a short or a long period of time.
Okay. You touched on the demand gen side and gates, and obviously the goals of these kind of webinars is getting registrants, hopefully qualified registrants. We had a question from Mark in the audience. He said, do you have any data to show this methodology is more successful converting prospects to clients? I've been able to get to that point. I know it's a new concept, but any thoughts there?
No, this is actually pretty new, but I can share some stuff. Let me just if we could flip over to the slides. Okay, so let me just show you a little bit of data from the last webinar, not just the numbers, but some data related to engagement. So what you can see is here a survey that we did after the webinar, about 3 weeks after the webinar was broadcast, that said, okay, what components are viewed? You can see about a third viewed only the recorded flip the webinar presentation. A much smaller percentage viewed only the interview and Q&A webcast, like what we're seeing here. And the vast majority, well, the plurality, about half, viewed both the recorded and live sessions. And most of those were done actually before the live webcast, about a quarter of them less than 24 hours before, so there were a lot of kind of last-minute crammers in the audience. But this is where we start to get to engagement metrics. The recorded webinar was about 20 minutes long. About how much of it did you view? And 3/4 said they viewed all 20 minutes. And that was also reflected in looking in our system at the what we call the engagement score, which is a 1 to 10 score of how into it people were. And anything above a 6 says that they watched most of the presentation and they were engaged in it. And you can see about just under 3/4 were 6 or above. We asked people, did they view the recorded webinar all at once or in multiple sessions? Almost all of them recorded it all at once. And then this was kind of interesting. We asked, how do you compare this approach with most other webinar formats you've experienced? So the answers range from far worse and worse to far better and far better on the right. And you can see that kind of 84% of the people said, hey, this is a better or far better format. And people really liked the format and felt that it showed a whole lot of promise. So at least there was a lot of excitement around this, and the engagement of the audience really reflected that. So that's good news. We'll see how it converts all the way through, and we'd like to run a whole bunch of cases because one of the big variables is whether the content itself is engaging or convincing or whatever. But I hope probably by this time next year we're going to have a lot of data on actual conversion. And I'll be speaking on this topic at the upcoming Content to Conversion conference, and hope to bring some data there as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just point out that any demand gen strategy or model, attribution is really hard. So it's really hard to say, well, we did a webinar and converted these many folks to clients. It's really multi-touch, and engagement should be the main denominator there. I think so. Show those engagement models, and I think you can see a clear path there. So good stuff. I want to switch to we've got some questions coming around technology issues, Michael. I want to get your perspective on comments, questions. One of the things that I'm noticing is definitely we've got a really global audience that viewed the first session and are involved today for part 2. So we had a question from Howard, who's actually based in Israel. And Howard said he's noticed that the video stream for the recording was a little bit out of sync, a little choppy in some instances. Is that, given the global nature of communicating this across countries? What are you seeing there? Is that an issue? Anything you would discuss there?
Yeah, that's always a bit of a risk with video, and in this particular case, we used a kind of a single bandwidth approach to feeding the video out, and probably in retrospect, we might have been better off using either a lower bit rate or what's called a multi-stream type of feed that can adjust the video quality or the bandwidth that's actually used by the video to the capability of the particular browser or particular network that somebody's looking at it through. So I'm sorry for those anybody who had a really low bandwidth connection or was trying to watch it on a streaming over a kind of a 2G or 3G connection. I think that's one of the things you learn from this. But the good news about video for this type of presentation is that that it's pretty easy video to compress. When you take like a music video that has a lot of motion, or sports, or whatever, then it takes a lot of bandwidth to actually get a good picture. But when you're talking about just being able to render the facial expressions and the gestures and the props and things like that come from a video session or video interview, then the compression is a whole lot easier, and you can actually transmit at a much lower bandwidth, and so it's more accessible to more people around the world.
All right, great. We had another Silva from Slovenia, who was a big format of it. He says he's currently a GoToWebinar user and is interested in using this for training. He really liked the idea of it being really prompt transfer for information to clients. Or are you seeing that nimble aspect of it being important?
Yeah. Well, particularly when you when you use a tool like Novio to which is the iPad app that I talked about a little bit earlier on, to put together real quick presentations. One of our clients actually has started a series. I think it's well, I don't feel like I can say the name of the company, But one of our clients, which is a really well-known, interesting technology company, does these little 3-minute quick presentations. Some of which are presented to camera, some of which are based on 3-minute interviews. So it'll be 3 minutes on X, 3 minutes on Y, and they'll put them together with presentation slides and put them out. And they've got a bank of 100 of them that they send out as kind of mini content snippets, really snackable content bites for everything from from demand generation to lead nurturing to customer training to internal training.
All right. Yeah, you and I have talked about that. That concept of chalk talks, I think, is becoming more common. Yeah. It doesn't have to be big, formal, long presentation. The quicker, more accessible ways to get information out there seem to be working and much more powerful lately. So I want to take one more technology question, comment that we had in. You talked about the easy ability to compress these kinds of files. Roy had asked about what kind of formats are available for the recorded session. He said it's sometimes an area where internet is not all available. Is there ways to make like MP4 files of the flipped webinar available? Any thoughts on that, Michael, or maybe an offline version?
Yeah, so for the yeah, there are two questions or two answers to that. Number one is for part 2, which is this kind of live session, all of it goes out on YouTube, and YouTube has a way of actually downloading. I don't think it's native, but you can actually buy little programs or applications that can download any YouTube video and put it into MP4 format. So that's pretty easy. For the first part, we are just about to release a version of KnowledgeVision that will output video files of the presenter and slides that can be kind of packaged up to go on a like a USB mini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. We had a couple other questions I want to try to get to. We're at about 20 minutes left. Charity mentioned she's an On24 user, so she'd like any thoughts you have on could this flipped webinar format, do you think, work with their platform? She also mentioned the idea, since what we're doing here is a two-parter, are there ways to make sure that the both part gets on folks' calendars? Can you send them links or reminders that they would get both?
Sure. Okay, so On24 is a platform that is really optimized for the for the live experience, and certainly if we had On24 available to us and had already paid for it or whatever, that would certainly have been a good viable option for us for part 2. I'm not sure what they're doing. I know they've been experimenting a bit with the on-demand portion, creating the on-demand part 1 type assets. I'm not sure that they've gotten all the way to the footnotes and the programmable zoom controls and the follow-on transcripts and all that stuff. I just can't comment on their platform, but certainly it's a viable way, as is GoToMeeting or WebEx or whatever, to handle that second part. And again, the choice we made here was to use Google Plus Hangouts simply because it's literally available to everyone.
Right. Easily accessible. What about that scheduling aspect, Michael? Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Practices?
So that's just a matter of kind of how the reminder sequence gets written and gets distributed. So I think one of the challenges is that the way that the countdown sequences, the reminders going up to a webinar, are optimized in a lot of companies is around, okay, getting people to get to that live webinar. So it's kind of a drumbeat that increases its frequency as you get closer and closer to the date. But in this case, a lot of the value is actually delivered whenever the viewer wants to watch it. And so I think that we're learning about how to get better and better at reminding people that they've got homework to do that they're going to benefit a lot from, and they can do that anytime they want. This is a little bit awkward this time because we started to distribute the content just before the holidays started, and probably the last thing people want to do over the holidays is to watch me giving a webinar. So we had a lot of views in the last couple of days after people got back from New Year's and after the holidays. But I think that one of the things that we want to take as learning and how to deal with this format is what the best practice is at giving people kind of reminders and offers along the way.
Okay, great. We had a good question from Barrett that I think is applicable for any and all webinars people are trying to figure out is what's the optimal length? So any thoughts, Michael, for sort of part one of the pre-recorded? You said that was about 20 minutes. Any thoughts to what the right optimal time length you think would be for this, with the Flip the Webinar or even webinars in general?
Yeah, I mean the glib answer is as much or as little as you can present the core concept, and then cut it by 30%. Because you can always get tighter in presenting these concepts. We've settled on around 20 minutes, and as a something that allows you to get deeply enough into a topic that you aren't trivializing it, but at the same time, you aren't kind of chewing up a whole hour. And one of the problems that I have is that is with the webinar that drags on and takes an hour or 45 minutes to get to the punchline. I'd rather have it delivered crisply and efficiently, and to have resources where people can kind of drill in. And my rule of thumb is if it's going to take more than 20 minutes, do it as 2 webinars.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, people's attention span is much more difficult now. We have a question from Jennifer.
I will say just one thing on that, Andrew, though, is that high in the funnel, with when you're introducing concepts, I think that you do need to be shorter and crisper, and there's a lot of value to that. As you get deeper and deeper into nurturing programs and especially into kind of customer learning when they've already committed to the product, I think that you can take more time with the content, and because people want to go a level deeper.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to that demand generation topic and sort of the core of that, we had a question from Steve, which is a good one. He asked, what lead data are you able to capture with these types of 2 phases of flipped webinars? And I believe in this instance, Michael, we actually set up the registration through Marketo so it could be integrated. So you can take a pretty traditional approach to how you're gathering lead data. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, that's exactly accurate. I mean, again, you have to separate the the kind of the whole lead generation registration platform from the content delivery itself. So you really use whatever method that you use for taking registrations for white papers or for traditional webinars or whatever. ebooks, and apply it to this. And so in effect, you've got a landing page fronting a content page, and the content page has embedded on it part 1 and eventually part 2 of the webinar, and everything else is just the way you do the rest of your demand generation work.
Correct. All right, we'll take I think 2 more questions. We have a question from Penny. She mentioned she's in an organization that's extremely distributed. I would think that offers a lot of benefit for this kind of environment. Again, the ability to learn in advance, learn sort of at their own convenience. Are you seeing that as a big opportunity? Any thoughts you'd have for Penny on how it might work in that environment?
No, exactly. I mean, that's that's one of the key things that happens. That in a highly distributed organization, people spend a lot of time on airplanes, going around and visiting sites, and that's real valuable. But the more that's in a subject matter expert's head that they want to that contains valuable information about what they know, the more in demand that they are, and the harder it is for them to get around to a distributed organization. So these kinds of online presentations are really ideal for that, and again, we've been talking about demand generation, but in corporate learning, this really works pretty well to basically have these on-demand assets, and then periodic kind of interactive sessions that might be conference calls, might be sessions like this.
Yeah, and you can see it moving from the classroom environment to, as you said, training, and then I think for marketing, everybody's looking for more time and space, ways to learn, so I think that makes a lot of sense. It's still early days, it's still kind of experimental, Michael, but we had Jennifer ask, I think she wants to bring this to her organization and is looking for any support. She asked if there's any published research on this kind of model. Do you guys have any of the benchmarks you share that you're going to be willing to share afterwards, or help people?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be writing a white paper on it as we get a little bit more experience. We're very early into it right now. There's a huge amount of research on the flipped classroom model. That's been around. Educators have been kind of talking about it for 10 or 15 years. They've been seriously into implementation of it for maybe 5 years, and so there's a large body of knowledge about it in traditional education. There is a growing amount of research about it in the corporate learning space, but I think that we're kind of on the bleeding edge here when we're using it for marketing. But I'll tell you, I really do believe that the webinar needs to be reinvented. Here's an opportunity to do it on some dimension. I don't think it needs to be blown up. I think webinars have a really important place. The problem is that how do we break them out of the rut? Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, it's absolutely it's part of the menu now. I think it just needs to be rethought, and I think this is a good approach to it. So a couple of final thoughts. I want to remind everybody. So you obviously, most of you should have gone back and at some point viewed part 1 of this. Part 1 will be available, and you can go back and view it, share it with your team members. Part 2, this Q&A portion, again, after today will be available, so both portions if you want to view them together. Michael, any parting thoughts as we conclude today? Any other best practices or tips you'd recommend to the audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, just on what you just said, if our viewers want to bookmark this page, this will flip back to showing part 1, shortly after this webinar, and then part 2, the recording of it, should go up later today or tonight on exactly the same page. So just bookmark this page, and you'll be able to get to it. And as far as parting thoughts are concerned, we're really excited about the prospect of taking this format and you know, a lot of marketers use it. I think the research that I saw on the B2B benchmarks last year said that 63% of marketers are using webinars as part of their B2B marketing program. The interesting thing is that that's been dropping a little bit each year over time. So while a lot of other media are going up, like video and online presentations and the like, they're actually slotting in now above webinars. But I think that webinars properly done can be revitalized and start moving back up that list. And what we need to do is to kind of take a fresh look at them. Take some of the the risk and the white knuckles out of actually doing them, and explore some of the cool new media that are available to us. And that I've really kind of made that one of my missions for 2015.
That's great. I want to go back, Marco, before we let you go. There was a couple of questions that came in about Novio, and people in the question were actually misspelling it. I don't think they were absolutely maybe heard you thoroughly on that. So if you could just kind of hammer home Novio, where people can find it, any other thoughts, because we did have a few questions and comments about that.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I should have spelled it. Novio is in a way a play on words on the Spanish for love interest, which is Novio. But Novio is spelled K-N-O-V-I-O, which is basically KnowledgeVision without half its letters. Novio, K-N-O-V-I-O. If you search for it in the App Store, you'll find it. It's a free app. You can play around with it. It's actually really quite cool. And in fact, I think I have it right here. Yeah,
I've actually had the opportunity to see some of the presentations you've created in it, so it is really cool. I would recommend people take the time to go check it out.
Yeah, and so this is actually is part one of the webinar, on my iPad, and I can basically just record the presentation straight into the iPad using the built-in camera and microphone, and publish it. And it's worth exploring. It's a great way to kind of get your feet wet a little bit into the kind of multimedia online presentation space.
Yeah, we've got our sales team using it. And I would say they're not ultra high tech, but they were able to figure it out pretty quickly and make really good use of it. So, all right, Michael, I want to thank you very much for walking us back through this and walking through some great questions. I really like the concept of Flip the Webinar. I think this is going to be interesting as people are clearly looking for alternative ways to engage. I think the traditional format, like you said, may be getting a little tired, and it's time for people to find an alternative. So appreciate you bringing your creative juices to this, and thank you again for today's questions.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to some of you at Content to Conversion in Scottsdale a little bit later on this year. And we'll be talking about the flipped webinar concept, and love to have some sessions on that. So.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Michael will be one of many great speakers we'll have there. That's actually February 16th to the 18th, and you can find more information about that at DemandGenReport.com. So thanks for mentioning that, Michael. Look forward to seeing you there as well.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.